toddler found a German Shepherd, curled up in a shopping mall escalator pit. What happened next was unbelievable. What happened next will shock you beyond belief. A simple trip to the mall turned into something nobody could have predicted. The story you're about to listen to will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about coincidence and fate. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the glass doors of Westfield Mall, like angry fists demanding entry. Inside, the usual afternoon crowd had thinned to almost nothing. Only a few shoppers wandered between stores, their footsteps echoing off the polished floors. The sound of water dripping somewhere in the distance mixed with the soft hum of the escalators that carried people between floors. Emma Chen pushed her shopping cart with one hand, while her 5-year-old son, Jake, skipped beside her. His small sneakers squeaked against the floor as he hopped from one tile to another, playing some game only he understood. Emma's mind was elsewhere, running through her mental grocery list. Milk, bread, something for dinner. Simple things, normal things. She had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, their lives would change forever. "Mom, look at that lady's dog," Jake said, pointing at a woman walking past with a tiny Yorkshire Terrier in a pink sweater. "That's nice, honey," Emma replied, not really paying attention. She was focused on finding the grocery section in this maze of a mall. Everything looked the same to her. Store after store, escalator after escalator. She'd been coming here for 3 years, but it still felt like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Jake stopped walking suddenly. His hand shot out and grabbed Emma's shirt, pulling her to a halt near the main escalator that led to the food court. His eyes were wide, focused on something she couldn't see. "Mom, do you hear that?" Emma paused, listening. The mall's background noise filled her ears. Music from nearby stores, the distant chatter of teenagers, the mechanical whir of the escalators. Nothing unusual. "Hear what, baby?" "Someone's crying." Emma looked around. A few shoppers walked past them, but nobody seemed upset. An elderly man sat on a bench reading a newspaper. 2 teenage girls giggled as they looked at their phones. Everything seemed normal. "I don't hear anything, Jake. Are you sure?" But Jake wasn't listening anymore. He had dropped to his knees beside the escalator, pressing his face against the metal grating that ran along the side. His small hands gripped the bars as he peered down into the darkness below. "Mom, there's someone down there. Someone needs help." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Something in her son's voice was different, urgent, scared. She'd never heard him sound like this before. "Jake, get away from there. It's just machinery down there." "No, Mom, listen." Emma knelt beside her son, pressing her ear close to the grating. For a moment, she heard nothing but the mechanical sounds of the escalator. Then, faintly, almost too quiet to notice, she heard it. A soft whimpering sound, like someone in pain. "Oh my God," she whispered. Jake's eyes met hers, and she saw something there that made her stomach drop. He wasn't just curious anymore. He was terrified. "Mom, it's a dog, a big dog, and he's stuck." Emma pressed her face against the grating, trying to see into the darkness below. The space underneath the escalator was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. But there, in the shadows, she could make out a shape, something large and dark, barely moving. "We have to help him, Mom. We have to." Emma's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. She dialed mall security, her heart pounding as she waited for someone to answer. "Westfield Mall Security, this is Marcus." "Hi, this is Emma Chen. I'm here with my son, and we found a dog trapped under the main escalator. He needs help right away." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Too long of a pause. "A dog, you said?" "Yes, he's stuck down there. He sounds hurt." "Where exactly are you located?" "The main escalator near the food court entrance. Please, he needs help." "I'll be right there." Emma hung up and looked at Jake, who was still pressed against the grating. His eyes were filled with tears. "Is he going to be okay, Mom?" "I don't know, baby, but we're going to try to help him." 10 minutes passed, then 15. Emma called security again, but nobody answered. She tried the mall's main number, but the woman who answered said security was busy with another situation. Jake refused to move from the grating, talking softly to whatever was down there. "It's okay, boy. We're going to get you out. My mom's really smart. She fixes things." Emma felt helpless. She tried calling the fire department, but they said they needed permission from the mall to enter the premises. She tried calling animal control, but they were closed for the day. Mom, he's not moving as much anymore. Emma looked down through the grating again. The shape in the darkness seemed smaller now, more still. Time was running out. We're going to get you out of there, she called down. Just hold on. 20 minutes later, a security guard finally appeared. He was a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. His name tag read, Marcus. You called about a dog? Yes, he's right down there. You can hear him if you listen. Marcus knelt beside the grating for about 2 seconds before standing up and brushing off his knees. I don't hear anything. You have to listen closer. He's hurt. Ma'am, there's no dog down there. It's just machinery. Sometimes the escalators make noise. Jake jumped up, his small hands balled into fists. There is a dog down there. You're lying. Emma put a hand on her son's shoulder. Please, just look again. He's definitely there. Marcus sighed and looked at his watch. Look, even if there was a dog down there, which there isn't, we can't just take apart the escalator. That would shut down half the mall. But he's dying. Ma'am, I'm sure you think you heard something, but there's nothing down there. Maybe you should take your kid to get some ice cream or something. Emma felt anger rising in her chest. Are you serious right now? I'm just doing my job, and my job is to tell you that there's no dog down there. But as Marcus turned to walk away, Jake grabbed his arm. Wait, please, just listen one more time. Something in the boy's voice made Marcus pause. He looked down at Jake's tear-stained face, and for a moment, his expression softened. Okay, kid, one more time. Marcus knelt beside the grating again. This time, he stayed longer. Emma watched his face change as he heard the soft whimpering coming from below. Jesus, he whispered. There is something down there. I told you, Jake said. Marcus stood up slowly, his face pale. This is not good. What do you mean? I mean, there's not supposed to be anything down there. Nothing should be able to get into that space. Emma felt her heart stop. What are you saying? Marcus looked around nervously as if he was afraid someone might be listening. I'm saying that if there's a dog down there, someone put him there on purpose. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Emma looked at Jake, who was staring at Marcus with wide eyes. We have to get him out, Jake said quietly. Kid, I wish we could, but we have to get him out now. There was something in Jake's voice that made both adults stop and stare at him. He wasn't crying anymore. He wasn't begging. He was stating a fact, like he knew something they didn't. Jake, what's wrong? He's not just hurt, Mom. He's scared. Really, really scared. And he keeps thinking about someone who used to take care of him. Someone who's gone now. Emma felt goosebumps rise on her arms. What do you mean? I can hear his thoughts, Mom. He's thinking about a man with kind eyes who used to give him treats. But something bad happened to that man. And now, he's all alone. Marcus took a step back. That's impossible, kid. He's also thinking about other dogs, lots of other dogs, and they're all scared too. Emma knelt beside her son, her hands shaking. Jake, how do you know all this? I don't know, Mom. I just do. Sometimes I can hear what animals are thinking. You remember when Mrs. Peterson's cat was sick, and I told you he had a sore paw, and you thought I was just guessing? Emma did remember. Jake had insisted that the neighbor's cat had hurt his paw, even though the cat wasn't limping. 2 days later, Mrs. Peterson took the cat to the vet and found out he had a small fracture. Jake, are you saying you can talk to animals? Not talk, just listen. And this dog is telling me things that are really scary, Mom. Marcus was looking at both of them like they'd lost their minds. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not a game, Jake interrupted. The dog says there are more dogs where he came from, and they're all in trouble. Emma stood up slowly. What kind of trouble? Bad men, Mom. Really bad men who hurt dogs for money. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She looked at Marcus, who had gone completely pale. We have to get him out, she said. Lady, I can't just... We have to get him out now. Marcus looked around nervously. Even if I wanted to help, I don't have the tools. We'd need to call maintenance, and they're not here on weekends. Then we find another way. Emma was surprised by the determination in her own voice. She'd always been the kind of person who followed rules, who didn't cause trouble. but something about this situation had awakened something fierce inside her. "Mom, he's getting weaker," Jake said softly. "We don't have much time." Emma looked at her son, then at the grating, then at Marcus. "What if we don't wait for permission?" "What do you mean? What if we just get him out ourselves?" Marcus shook his head. "That's impossible. The grating is bolted down. You'd need power tools." "Then we find power tools." "Lady, you can't just—" "Yes, I can." Emma was already walking toward the hardware store she'd noticed earlier. Jake followed her, and after a moment's hesitation, so did Marcus. The hardware store was small but well stocked. Emma found the tool section and started looking at power drills and crowbars. A young employee with spiky hair and multiple piercings approached her. "Can I help you find something?" "I need to remove some bolts from metal grating." "What kind of bolts?" Emma described what she'd seen, and the employee nodded. "You'll need a drill with a metal bit, maybe a crowbar for leverage, but that's going to be loud." "I don't care about the noise." The employee looked at her curiously. "Are you sure? Mall security doesn't usually like people making noise." Emma looked at Marcus, who was standing behind her looking uncomfortable. "Mall security is helping me." The employee shrugged and helped her gather the tools. As they walked back to the escalator, Emma's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and saw a text from an unknown number. "Stop what you're doing and leave the mall immediately." Emma's blood ran cold. She showed the text to Marcus, who went even paler than before. "Who would send that?" "I don't know, but we're not leaving." They reached the escalator, and Emma knelt beside the grating with the drill. The metal was thick, but the bolts were old and rusty. It took her 10 minutes to remove the first one. "Mom, he's moving again. He can hear us." Emma worked faster, sweat beading on her forehead despite the mall's air conditioning. The second bolt came out easier than the first. "Almost there, boy," she called down. "Just hold on." As she worked on the third bolt, she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy footsteps. She turned to see two men in dark suits walking toward them. They didn't look like mall security. "Ma'am, we need you to stop what you're doing and come with us." Emma's hands tightened on the drill. "I'm not going anywhere until I get this dog out." "Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property and damaging mall equipment." "I don't care." One of the men reached for her arm, but Marcus stepped between them. "Wait, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. The woman and her son need to leave now." Jake suddenly stood up, his small body shaking with anger. "You're the bad men, aren't you? You're the ones who hurt the dogs." The two men looked at each other, and Emma saw something pass between them. Something that made her stomach drop. "Jake, get behind me." But Jake wasn't backing down. "The dog told me about you. He said you wear dark clothes and you smell like cigarettes and you have mean eyes." Emma noticed for the first time that both men did indeed smell like cigarettes, and their eyes were cold, emotionless. "We're leaving," Emma said, standing up with the drill still in her hands. "All of us, including the dog." "No, you're not." The larger of the two men stepped forward, but before he could reach them, the sound of barking filled the air, not from the grating below, but from behind them. Emma turned to see a woman with a German shepherd on a leash walking toward them. "Is everything okay here?" the woman asked, her voice calm but her eyes alert. "Everything's fine," one of the men said. "Just a misunderstanding." But the woman's German shepherd was not calm. He was growling, his hackles raised, his eyes fixed on the two men in suits. "Rex doesn't usually growl at people," the woman said. "He only does that when something's wrong." Emma saw her chance. "These men are trying to stop us from rescuing a dog that's trapped under the escalator." The woman's eyes widened. "A dog is trapped down there?" "Yes, and these men don't want us to help him." The woman looked at the two men, then at Emma and Jake. "I'm calling the police." "That won't be necessary," one of the men said, but his voice was nervous now. "I think it is." As the woman pulled out her phone, the two men backed away. "This isn't over," one of them said to Emma. "You have no idea what you're getting into." Then they were gone, disappearing into the crowd of shoppers like they'd never been there at all. Emma's hands were shaking as she knelt beside the grating again. "We have to hurry." The woman with the German shepherd knelt beside her. "I'm Sarah, by the way, and this is Rex. We're going to help you." "Thank you." Working together, they removed the last two bolts. The grating came free with a metallic screech that echoed through the mall. Emma shined her phone's flashlight down into the space below. What she saw made her gasp. A large German shepherd lay curled on his side, his fur matted and dirty. He was thin, too thin, and his eyes were dull with exhaustion. But he was alive, and around his neck was a collar with no name tag, just a small metal device that looked like some kind of tracking chip. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "What did they do to him?" Emma didn't answer. She was already lowering herself into the narrow space, her heart pounding. The dog lifted his head slightly as she approached, and she saw intelligence in his eyes, and something else, recognition, as if he'd been waiting for her. "It's okay, boy. We're here to help." The dog was too weak to move on his own, but he didn't fight as Emma carefully lifted him. He was heavier than she'd expected, but Sarah helped pull him up through the opening. As soon as the dog was free, Jake knelt beside him, his small hands gently stroking the animal's fur. "His name is Shadow," he said quietly, "and he's been waiting for someone to find him for a long time." Emma looked at her son. "How do you know his name?" "He told me. And Mom, he says we're in danger now. The bad men are coming back, and they're really angry." Emma's phone buzzed again, another text from the unknown number. "You should have listened. Now it's too late." As she read the message, Emma heard the sound of car engines starting in the parking lot. Multiple engines, too many for a coincidence. "We need to go," she said, "right now." Sarah nodded, scooping up Shadow in her arms. "My car's in the north parking lot. Yours? South lot. We'll take mine, it's closer." As they hurried through the mall toward the north exit, Emma's mind raced. Who were those men? Why didn't they want the dog rescued? And what did Jake mean when he said he could hear Shadow's thoughts? Behind them, she could hear the sound of heavy footsteps. They were being followed. "Mom, Shadow says there are more dogs where he came from. Lots more, and they're all going to die if we don't help them." Emma's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "He says the bad men are getting rid of all the dogs, tonight, and Shadow was supposed to be the first one." They reached the north exit, and Sarah pushed through the doors into the parking lot. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with moisture. Emma could see Sarah's car, a blue Honda, about 50 feet away. They were almost there when the black SUV pulled up beside them. The window rolled down, and Emma saw the face of one of the men from inside the mall. He was holding something in his hand, something small and black. "Get in the car," he said calmly. "All of you, and bring the dog." Emma's heart stopped. She looked at Sarah, who was holding Shadow protectively against her chest. The dog's eyes were alert now, focused on the man in the SUV. "Run," Sarah whispered, and they ran. Emma grabbed Jake's hand and sprinted toward the Honda, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Behind them, she could hear car doors slamming and men shouting. Sarah reached the car first, fumbling with her keys as she tried to open the door while still holding Shadow. Come on," she muttered. The car doors unlocked with a beep, and they all piled in. Sarah started the engine just as the black SUV pulled up behind them, blocking their exit. "Hold on," Sarah said, and slammed the car into reverse. What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about the world, but Emma didn't know that yet. All she knew was that her son was in the back seat holding a dog they had rescued from what was starting to look like something much darker than a simple accident. And the men who were chasing them weren't giving up. Sarah's Honda lurched backward, tires screaming against the wet asphalt. The black SUV's bumper scraped against theirs with a metallic shriek that sent shivers down Emma's spine. For a moment, they were locked together like two angry animals, neither vehicle able to move. Come on," Sarah muttered, grinding the gears as she tried to break free. In the back seat, Jake held Shadow close to his chest. The dog's breathing was shallow, but his eyes were alert, watching everything through the car windows. Emma twisted in her seat to look at her son. "Are you okay, baby?" "Shadow says they're not going to give up, Mom. He says they can't let us go, now that we know." "Know what?" "About the other dogs, about what they're doing to them." Emma's blood ran cold. Before she could ask more questions, Sarah's car broke free from the SUV with a loud crack. They shot backward across the parking lot, Sarah spinning the wheel hard to avoid hitting a parked car. "Where do we go?" Sarah shouted over the engine noise. "I don't know. Home, I guess." "No!" Jake's voice was sharp with panic. "Shadow says we can't go home. They know where we live." Emma stared at her son. How could they possibly know where we live? "They've been watching us, Mom, for a long time." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She thought about all the times over the past few weeks when she'd felt like someone was watching her. The strange cars parked on their street. The phone calls that hung up when she answered. She'd convinced herself it was just her imagination. Sarah gunned the engine and headed for the parking lot exit. The black SUV was right behind them, its headlights cutting through the gray afternoon like angry eyes. As they reached the street, Emma saw two more black vehicles waiting at the intersection. "They're everywhere," Sarah whispered. "Turn left," Jake said suddenly. "Shadow says there's a way out if we turn left." Sarah didn't question him. She yanked the wheel left, tires squealing as they took the corner too fast. The Honda tilted dangerously but stayed upright. Behind them, the SUV tried to follow, but took the turn too wide, giving them a few precious seconds. "Where are we going?" Emma asked. "I don't know," Sarah replied. "But your son seems to know something we don't." Emma looked back at Jake, who was whispering something to Shadow. The dog's ears were perked up, like he was listening intently. "Jake, what is Shadow telling you?" "He says there's a safe place. A place where the bad men can't find us. But we have to hurry." They drove through the residential streets, the black SUV still following, but falling further behind. Sarah was a good driver, taking turns quickly and smoothly. But Emma could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Who are these people?" Emma asked. "I don't know, but they're not just random criminals. They're organized, professional." Jake spoke up from the back seat. "Shadow says they work for someone important, someone who has a lot of money and a lot of power." "How does a dog know that?" "He lived with them for a while, before they decided he was too dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Jake was quiet for a moment, listening to something only he could hear. He's too smart. He remembers things. And he knows too much about what they're doing. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "What are they doing?" "Bad things, Mom. Really bad things." They drove in silence for a few minutes, winding through neighborhoods Emma didn't recognize. The black SUV was nowhere to be seen, but she knew they weren't safe yet. "Turn right here," Jake said suddenly. Sarah turned onto a narrow street lined with old houses. Most of them looked abandoned, their windows boarded up and their yards overgrown with weeds. "Where are we going?" "Shadow says there's someone here who can help us. Someone who knows about the bad men." They pulled up in front of a small house at the end of the street. It looked different from the others, cleaner, better maintained. There was a pickup truck in the driveway and lights on in the windows. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked. "Shadow says it's okay. The person inside is a friend." Emma wasn't convinced, but they didn't have many options. They got out of the car, Sarah carrying Shadow, and walked up the front steps. Before Emma could knock, the door opened. A man stood in the doorway, tall and lean, with graying hair and tired eyes. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and there was something about him that seemed familiar, though Emma was sure she'd never seen him before. "You must be Emma," he said quietly. "I've been expecting you." Emma's heart jumped. "How do you know my name?" "Come inside. All of you. We don't have much time." They followed him into the house, which was small but comfortable. The living room was filled with books and papers, and there were photographs on the walls showing the man with various dogs, German shepherds mostly, but other breeds too. "My name is David," the man said, closing the door behind them. "And I used to work for the people who were chasing you." Sarah set Shadow down on the couch, and the dog immediately curled up, exhausted. Jake sat beside him, his small hand resting on the dog's head. "What people?" Emma asked. "The mayor's private security firm. Officially, they provide protection for city officials and investigate threats. Unofficially, they run a dog fighting ring that brings in millions of dollars a year." Emma felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. Dog fighting? Not just fighting, breeding, training, trafficking. They supplied dogs to illegal fighting rings all over the country, and Shadow here was one of their prize assets. Emma looked at the dog, who was watching David with intelligent eyes. "He doesn't look like a fighting dog." "That's because he's not. Shadow was trained for something else entirely. He was a detector dog, trained to find things that the mayor's people wanted to keep hidden." "What kind of things?" David sat down in a chair across from them, his expression grim. "Money, drugs, bodies." The word hung in the air like a dark cloud. Emma felt sick. Bodies? The mayor's operation isn't just about dogfighting. They're involved in other things too. Things that sometimes require people to disappear. Sarah spoke up for the first time since they had entered the house. How do you know all this? Because I was part of it. For 3 years I trained dogs for them. I thought I was doing legitimate police work. I didn't realize what they were really using the dogs for until it was too late. What happened? I found out about the fighting rings, about the money, about the other things, and I tried to expose them. David rolled up his sleeve, revealing a long scar running from his wrist to his elbow. They made it very clear that I should keep my mouth shut, but I couldn't, so I took Shadow and tried to run. You took Shadow? He was my partner, my responsibility. I wasn't going to let them kill him just because he knew too much. Emma looked at Jake, who was listening intently. How does Shadow know too much? Dogs like Shadow are trained to remember everything they find. Every location, every scent, every detail. He's been in places where bodies are buried. He's seen things that could bring down the entire operation. So they want to kill him. They want to kill all of us now. You, me, your son, Sarah. We're all witnesses to something we weren't supposed to see. Emma felt tears building in her eyes. My son is 5 years old. He doesn't know anything about any of this. He knows more than you think. Shadow has been communicating with him, hasn't he? Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. That's not normal. Most people can't hear what Shadow is thinking. But your son can. That makes him dangerous to them. What do you mean? If Jake can understand what Shadow is telling him, then he can access all of Shadow's memories, every location where bodies are buried, every detail of their operation. He becomes a living witness to everything they've done. The implications hit Emma like a truck. Her son wasn't just in danger because he'd witnessed something. He was in danger because he could potentially expose an entire criminal organization. We have to go to the police, she said. David shook his head. The police are compromised. Half of them are on the mayor's payroll. The other half are too scared to act. Then what do? We disappear, tonight, all of us. I can't disappear. I have a job, a life. Jake has school. You don't have a choice. They know where you live, where you work, where Jake goes to school. They'll be watching all of those places. Emma felt panic rising in her chest. This is insane. This morning I was just a normal person buying groceries. I know, but that was before you saved Shadow, before Jake started communicating with him. Everything changed the moment you opened that grating. Sarah had been quiet, but now she spoke up. There has to be another way. Some way to expose them without running away. There is, David said slowly. But it's dangerous. Much more dangerous than running. What is it? Shadow knows where they keep the other dogs. He knows the location of their main facility. If we could get there, document what they're doing, and get the evidence to the right people. We could shut them down, Emma finished. Maybe, but the facility is heavily guarded, and if they catch us there, they'll kill us all. Jake suddenly looked up from where he was sitting with Shadow. Shadow says there's another way to get in, a secret way that only he knows about. David leaned forward. What kind of secret way? There's a tunnel under the building. Shadow used to go through it when he was working for them. He says it's still there, and it's not guarded. David's eyes widened. A tunnel? I never knew about any tunnel. Shadow says that's because it was built for the dogs, not for people. The bad men used it to move dogs in and out without being seen. Emma looked at her son, then at David. Are you seriously suggesting we break into a criminal facility to rescue a bunch of dogs? I'm suggesting we break into a criminal facility to gather evidence that could save a bunch of dogs, and possibly save a lot of people too. It's suicide. Maybe. But if we don't do something, they're going to kill all the dogs anyway. Tomorrow night, according to my sources, they're closing down the facility and eliminating all the evidence. Including the animals? Including the animals! Emma felt tears streaming down her face. She looked at Jake, who was watching her with serious eyes. Mom, we have to help them. Shadow says they're all scared, and they don't understand why no one comes to save them. Jake, this is too dangerous. I can't risk your life. But Mom, what if no one else helps them? What if we're the only ones who can? Emma looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Sarah, determined and angry. David, tired but resolute. Jake, innocent but somehow wise beyond his years. And Shadow, watching her with eyes that seemed to hold more intelligence than any dog should possess. "If we do this," she said slowly, "what exactly are we walking into?" David stood up and walked to a desk in the corner of the room. He pulled out a folder filled with photographs and documents. The facility is about 20 miles outside the city. It's disguised as a legitimate dog breeding operation, but underneath it's something else entirely. There are about 50 dogs there right now, all being held in conditions that would make you sick. He spread the photographs across the coffee table. Emma gasped at what she saw. Dogs in tiny cages, some barely able to stand. Dogs with fresh wounds from fighting. Dogs that looked like they were dying. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "These photos are 6 months old. It's probably worse now." Jake looked at the photos, his face pale. Shadow says some of his friends are still there. He says they're waiting for someone to come get them. Emma wiped her eyes. "How would we even get there? I have a van. We could be there in an hour. And then what? We just walk in and start taking pictures? We use the tunnel that Shadow knows about. We document everything we can, and we try to get out alive." Emma felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind her was safety, normalcy, the life she'd always known. Ahead was darkness, danger, and the possibility of death. But she thought about the dogs in the photographs. She thought about Shadow, who had been trapped and left to die. She thought about Jake, who somehow understood things that adults couldn't grasp. "When do we leave?" she asked. David smiled for the first time since they'd met him. "Right now. We'll take my van. It's less conspicuous than Sarah's car." As they prepared to leave, Emma's phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "We know where you are. You have 5 minutes to come outside with the dog, or we're coming in." Emma showed the message to David, who cursed under his breath. "They found us. How is that possible?" Jake suddenly stood up, his face white with fear. "Shadow says they put something in his collar, something that lets them track him." David grabbed Shadow's collar and examined it closely. Sure enough, there was a small device embedded in the leather, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. "GPS tracker," he said, ripping it off and throwing it on the floor. "But it's too late. They already know we're here." Through the window, Emma could see black vehicles surrounding the house. Men in dark suits were getting out, and they were carrying weapons. "Back door," David said, grabbing a bag from the closet. "Move. Now." They ran through the house toward the kitchen, Shadow limping beside them. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Behind them, she could hear the front door being kicked in. "Police! Nobody move!" But they weren't police. Emma knew that now. They were something much worse. David's van was parked in the alley behind the house. They piled in just as the back door of the house exploded inward. Men with guns poured through, shouting orders. "Drive," Emma said. "Drive now." David started the van and floored the accelerator. They shot down the alley, tires screaming, just as the first. Gunshots shattered the rear window. "Get down!" David shouted. They crouched in their seats as more gunshots followed them down the alley. Emma pulled Jake against her, trying to shield him with her body. "Are they shooting at us?" Jake asked, his voice surprisingly calm. "Yes, baby, but we're going to be okay." "Shadow says they're not trying to kill us. They're trying to scare us." "What's the difference?" "They still need Shadow alive, and they need us alive to tell them what Shadow told us." Emma looked at her son with new eyes. He was processing things that she couldn't even understand. The connection between him and Shadow was deeper than she'd realized. They reached the end of the alley, and David turned onto a main street. The black vehicles were still behind them, but they were falling back. David knew these streets better than they did. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "The facility," David said. "If we're going to do this, we have to do it now, before they have time to move the dogs." Emma's phone was buzzing constantly now, text after text from the unknown number. "You're making a mistake. We can protect you if you cooperate. Your son doesn't have to get hurt. Last chance." Emma turned off the phone and threw it out the window. Whatever happened next, she was committed now. There was no going back. As they drove through the darkening streets toward the facility, Jake leaned against her shoulder. "Mom, are you scared?" "Yes, baby. I'm terrified." "Me too, but Shadow says everything's going to be okay." "How does he know?" Because he says sometimes the good guys win. And we're the good guys, right? Emma looked at her son, then at Shadow, who was watching the road ahead with alert eyes. She thought about all the dogs in those photographs, waiting for someone to save them. Yes, she said, we're the good guys. The facility loomed ahead of them in the darkness, surrounded by high fences and security lights. It looked like a prison, which, Emma realized, was exactly what it was. But somewhere inside, dogs were waiting. And they were running out of time. David parked the van in a cluster of trees about half a mile from the facility. Through the darkness, Emma could see the harsh glare of security lights cutting through the night like searchlights. The building itself was larger than she'd expected, a sprawling complex of concrete and steel that looked more like a military installation than a dog breeding facility. "This is it," David whispered, turning off the engine. Emma's stomach churned as she stared at the forbidding structure. "It looks like a fortress." "That's because it is. They've got cameras, motion sensors, guard patrols. Getting in through the front would be suicide." Jake pressed his face against the van's window, Shadow beside him. The dog's ears were perked up, alert and focused on something Emma couldn't see. "Shadow says the tunnel entrance is on the north side, behind those big metal containers." David pulled out a pair of binoculars and scanned the area Jake had indicated. "I see them. Storage containers, probably 20 or 30 of them. Good cover, but we'll have to get past the outer fence first." "How do we do that?" "Wire cutters. I've got them in my bag." David reached into the back of the van and pulled out a black duffel bag. "Everything we need is in here. Cameras, recording equipment, first aid supplies." Sarah spoke up for the first time in several minutes. "What about weapons?" "I've got a handgun, but I'm hoping we won't need it. Our goal is to get in, document what we find, and get out without being detected." Emma felt a surge of fear. "And if we are detected, then we run. Fast." Jake tugged on Emma's sleeve. "Mom, Shadow wants to tell you something important." Emma knelt beside the dog, who was looking at her with those intelligent brown eyes. "What is it?" Jake listened for a moment, then translated. "He says there are guards inside, but they're lazy. They don't expect anyone to get in through the tunnel because it's too small for people, but he thinks we can fit if we crawl." "How long is this tunnel?" "About 50 feet. It leads directly into the basement where they keep the dogs." David nodded grimly. "That makes sense. They'd want to move dogs in and out without being seen from the road." Emma looked at her 5-year-old son, then at the dangerous facility ahead of them. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to turn around, to take Jake home, to forget any of this had ever happened. "Jake, I want you to stay in the van." "No, Mom. Shadow needs me to translate, and the other dogs need to know that someone's coming to help them. It's too dangerous." "Mom, Shadow says the dogs are really scared. They think they're going to die tonight. If I don't come, they might not understand that we're trying to help them." David looked at Emma sympathetically. "He's probably right. If the dogs panic when we show up, they could bark and alert the guards." Emma felt tears building in her eyes. "I can't put my son in that kind of danger." "I'll stay with him every second," Sarah said quietly. "I promise." Emma looked at Sarah, then at Jake, then at Shadow. The dog was watching her intently, as if he understood exactly what she was thinking. "Okay," she said finally, "but at the first sign of trouble, we leave, no matter what." "Agreed," David said. They spent the next few minutes going over the plan. David would cut through the fence while Emma and Sarah kept watch. Jake would stay close to Shadow, translating for the other dogs. They would document everything they could find, then get out the same way they came in. "What if there are too many dogs to rescue?" Emma asked. "We're not here to rescue them tonight," David said. "We're here to gather evidence. Once we expose what's happening here, the authorities will have to act. What if the authorities are corrupt too? Then we take the evidence to the media, to animal rights groups, to anyone who will listen." Emma nodded, trying to convince herself that this plan could actually work. They climbed out of the van and moved through the trees toward the facility. The night air was cool and damp, filled with the sound of crickets and distant traffic. But as they got closer to the building, Emma began to hear other sounds. Faint barking, whimpering, the sound of animals in distress. Jake stopped walking suddenly. "Shadow says they know we're coming." "The guards?" "The dogs. They can smell Shadow, and they're excited." Emma could hear it now. a low chorus of barks and whines coming from inside the building. Her heart broke at the sound. They reached the outer fence, which was about 8 feet tall and topped with razor wire. David pulled out the wire cutters and began working on a section near the ground. "This is going to take a few minutes," he whispered. Emma crouched beside him, keeping watch for guards. The facility seemed quiet except for the sounds coming from the dogs inside. No movement, no sign of human activity. "Maybe the guards are asleep," Sarah suggested. "Maybe, or maybe they're waiting for us." The thought sent a chill down Emma's spine. What if this was a trap? What if they'd been led here deliberately? But then she looked at Shadow, who was alert but not aggressive. If this was a trap, wouldn't the dog sense it? Jake seemed to read her thoughts. "Shadow says it's okay. The bad men think we're still at David's house." How does he know that? Because they left the tracker and his collar there. They think that's where we are. Emma felt a surge of hope. Maybe they actually had a chance. David finished cutting through the fence and peeled back a section large enough for them to crawl through. One by one, they slipped through the opening and found themselves in the shadow of the storage containers Jake had mentioned. The containers were huge, each one the size of a train car. They provided excellent cover, but they also created a maze of shadows and blind spots. Emma stayed close to Jake as they worked their way toward the north side of the building. "There," Jake whispered, pointing to what looked like a metal grate set into the ground. "That's the tunnel entrance." David knelt beside the grate and examined it closely. "It's locked, but not with anything fancy. Just a simple padlock." He pulled a small crowbar from his bag and worked at the lock. After a few tense minutes, it snapped open with a soft click. The grate lifted to reveal a dark tunnel leading down into the earth. It was narrow, barely wide enough for an adult to crawl through, and it smelled like wet concrete and dog fur. "Ladies first?" David asked with a weak smile. Emma looked at the tunnel, then at Jake. "I'll go first. Jake, you follow me. Sarah and David bring up the rear." "What about Shadow?" The dog was already at the tunnel entrance, his nose twitching as he sniffed the familiar scent. Without hesitation, he disappeared into the darkness. "I guess he knows the way," Emma said. She took a deep breath and lowered herself into the tunnel. The concrete was cold and rough against her hands and knees. Behind her, she could hear Jake crawling along, his breathing quick and nervous. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Emma's knees were getting scraped raw, and her shoulders were cramping from the confined space. But finally, she saw light ahead. Not bright light, but the dim glow of emergency lighting. She emerged into a basement room that took her breath away. Dozens of cages lined the walls, each one containing a dog. German shepherds, Rottweilers, pit bulls, and breeds Emma didn't recognize. Some of the dogs were huge, obviously bred for fighting. Others were smaller, looking more like pets than weapons. But all of them looked miserable. Their fur was matted and dirty. Many showed signs of injuries, fresh cuts, old scars, missing ears or tails. The smell was overwhelming. Urine, feces, infection, and despair. Jake emerged from the tunnel behind her, took one look around, and started crying. "Oh no," he whispered. "Shadow was right. This is horrible." Shadow appeared beside them, moving among the cages with purpose. He went to each one, sniffing and making soft whining sounds. The other dogs responded to him with excitement, their tails wagging despite their obvious suffering. They remember him, Emma realized. Sarah and David crawled out of the tunnel, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the scene in front of them. "Jesus Christ," David whispered. "It's worse than I thought." Sarah was already pulling out her camera, taking pictures of the cages and the conditions. "This is evidence of systematic animal abuse. This will shut them down for sure." Emma walked closer to one of the cages. Inside was a female German shepherd with 3 tiny puppies. The mother dog looked up at Emma with eyes full of exhaustion and pain. "How long have they been keeping dogs like this?" Emma asked. "Years," David said grimly. "Some of these dogs have never seen sunlight." Jake was kneeling beside Shadow, who was communicating something urgently. "Shadow says we need to hurry. The guards do rounds every hour, and the next one is in about 10 minutes. Emma looked at her watch. They'd been in the tunnel for nearly 20 minutes. Time was running out. "Sarah, how many pictures do you need?" "As many as possible. Every cage, every injured dog, every piece of evidence." They worked quickly but quietly, documenting the horrific conditions. Emma found herself getting angrier with each photograph. How could human beings treat animals this way? How could they look at these suffering creatures and feel nothing? In one corner of the room, she found something that made her stomach turn. A pile of dog collars, dozens of them, arranged neatly on a shelf. Each collar had a name tag, but the dogs they belonged to were nowhere to be seen. "David, what is this?" David looked at the collars and his face went pale. "Those are the dogs that didn't make it. They keep the collars as trophies." Emma felt bile rise in her throat. She took pictures of the collars, forcing herself to read each name. Rex, Bella, Maximum, Duke. Each one represented a life that had been lost to human greed and cruelty. Jake suddenly stood up from where he'd been sitting with Shadow. "Someone's coming." Emma listened but heard nothing. "Are you sure?" "Shadow says there are footsteps upstairs. 2 people, heading this way." David quickly gathered his camera equipment. "We need to go, now." But as they moved toward the tunnel entrance, Emma heard a sound that stopped her cold. A dog was whimpering, but not from any of the cages she could see. "There's another room," she realized. "We don't have time," David said urgently, but Emma was already moving toward the sound. She found a door on the far side of the basement, partially hidden behind a stack of dog food bags. Through the gap at the bottom, she could see light. She pushed the door open and stepped into a room that was even worse than the first one. This room contained the dogs that were too injured to fight, too sick to breed, or too old to be useful. They lay on dirty concrete floors, some barely breathing, others clearly dying. The stench was unbearable. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered behind her. In the center of the room was a table with medical equipment, but not the kind used to heal animals. Surgical instruments, syringes, bottles of chemicals. This was where they disposed of the dogs they no longer wanted. Emma's hands shook as she took the pictures of the scene. She felt like she was documenting a horror movie, not real life. Jake appeared in the doorway, his face white with shock. "Shadow says we have to leave right now. The guards are coming down the stairs." Emma could hear them now, heavy footsteps and voices getting closer. They had maybe 30 seconds before they were discovered. They ran back to the tunnel entrance, Shadow leading the way. David went first, then Sarah, then Jake. Emma was about to follow when she heard something that made her stop, a tiny whimpering sound coming from a cage near the tunnel entrance. She looked inside and saw a puppy, maybe 8 weeks old, lying alone in the corner. He was barely breathing, his tiny body shaking with cold and fear. "Emma, come on," David hissed from the tunnel. The puppy looked up at her with eyes that seemed to plead for help. He was so small, so helpless. She couldn't leave him here to die. Without thinking, Emma opened the cage and scooped up the puppy. He was lighter than she'd expected, just skin and bones covered in dirty fur. "What are you doing?" David demanded. "I can't leave him. We agreed no rescues tonight. Look at him, he'll be dead by morning." The footsteps were getting closer. Emma could hear voices now, speaking in low tones. "Check the basement first," one voice said. "Then the upper levels." Emma crawled into the tunnel with the puppy, pressed against her chest. He was so weak, he barely moved, just lay against her like a tiny hot water bottle. They crawled through the tunnel as fast as they could, but it felt like it took forever. Behind them, Emma could hear the guards entering the basement room. Any second now, they would notice the open cage, the disturbed dust around the tunnel entrance. They emerged into the cool night air just as shouts erupted from inside the building. "Someone's been here! Check the perimeter! Find them!" They ran through the maze of storage containers, staying low and moving fast. Emma clutched the puppy tightly, terrified that he would make a sound and give them away. They reached the fence just as searchlights began sweeping the area. David quickly ushered them through the hole he'd cut, then followed behind, pulling the fence back into place. They ran through the trees toward the van, branches scratching at their faces and clothes. Behind them, they could hear dogs barking and men shouting. The entire facility was coming alive. They reached the van and piled inside, David starting the engine before everyone was even seated. They drove away with the headlights off, navigating by moonlight until they were well clear of the facility. Only then did Emma allow herself to breathe. "Is everyone okay?" David asked. "We're alive," Sarah said, "and we got the evidence." Emma looked down at the puppy in her arms. He was still breathing, but barely. His eyes were closed, and she could feel his ribs through his thin coat. "We need to get him to a veterinarian," she said. "That's risky. They might be watching animal hospitals." "I don't care. He's dying." Jake leaned over to look at the puppy. "What's his name, Mom?" Emma looked at the tiny creature in her arms. He was so small, so fragile, but he was alive. Against all odds, he was alive. "Hope," she said quietly. "His name is Hope." As they drove through the dark streets, Emma's phone began buzzing. She'd forgotten that she'd thrown it out the window earlier. This was David's phone. "Don't answer it," he said. But Emma could see the caller ID on the screen. It was a number she recognized, though she couldn't place it at first. Then it hit her. "That's the veterinarian who scanned Shadow's chip," she said. "The one who seemed scared." David pulled over and answered the phone, putting it on speaker. "David? Thank God you answered. Dr. Morrison? How did you get this number?" "I've been trying to reach you all evening. Listen, you're in serious danger. They know you were at the facility tonight." Emma's blood ran cold. "How do they know?" "Because I told them." The words hit them like a physical blow. David's face went white with rage. "You what?" "They made me. They have my daughter, David. They took her from school this afternoon and said they'd kill her if I didn't cooperate." Emma felt the world spinning around her. "Dr. Morrison, where is your daughter now?" "I don't know. They said they'd let her go if I helped them find you." "And you believed them?" "I had to. She's all I have left." David's hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. "What did you tell them?" "Everything. About Shadow. About the boy who can communicate with him. About the evidence you were gathering." "I'm sorry, David. I had no choice." Emma looked at Jake, who was holding Shadow close. The dog's ears were laid back, sensing the tension in the van. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked. Before anyone could answer, Dr. Morrison's voice came through the phone again, but it was different now, scared. "David, they're here. They're at my house. They want to talk to you." The phone was silent for a moment. Then a new voice came on the line, a voice Emma recognized from the mall. "Hello, David. I think it's time we had a conversation." Emma's hands tightened protectively around the puppy. Whatever was coming next, she knew their lives would never be the same. "David Martinez," the voice continued, smooth and cold like winter ice. "Former canine trainer, current fugitive, and increasingly problematic thorn in my side." David's knuckles were white as he gripped the phone. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been very patient with you, but patience has its limits." Emma recognized the voice now. It was the same man who had confronted them at the mall, the one with the dead eyes and expensive suit. But hearing him speak at length, she realized there was something familiar about his tone, his cadence. "You have something that belongs to me," the voice continued. "Several things, actually. A dog, some photographs, a child who knows more than he should." Jake pressed closer to Emma, Shadow's fur bristling as if the dog could hear the menace in the man's voice through the phone. "We don't have anything that belongs to you," David said. "Oh, but you do. That dog you call Shadow? He was trained at considerable expense. The photographs you took tonight, they document a legitimate business operation. And the boy..." There was a pause, heavy with implication. "The boy is special, isn't he?" Emma's blood turned to ice. "Don't you dare threaten my son." "Mrs. Chen, I presume? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply stating facts. Your son has demonstrated a remarkable ability tonight. An ability that could be very valuable to the right people. You're insane if you think I'd let you anywhere near my child. Let me? Mrs. Chen, I don't think you understand your situation. Dr. Morrison here has been most helpful in explaining your activities this evening. Breaking and entering, theft of valuable property, industrial espionage, these are serious crimes." Sarah grabbed the phone from David. "What do you want?" "Ah, the dog lover with the Honda. Sarah Mitchell, 42, divorced. Works at the animal shelter on Maple Street. Did you know your ex-husband owes quite a lot of money to some very unpleasant people?" Sarah's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know things, just as I know that Mrs. Chen's mortgage is 3 months behind, and that Mr. Martinez has been living under a false identity for the past 2 years. Emma felt like the world was crumbling around her. How did this man know so much about their lives? "The point is," the voice continued, You're all vulnerable. You all have something to lose. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm prepared to make you an offer. We're listening, David said quietly. Return the dog. Delete the photographs. Bring the boy to me for a simple conversation. Do these things, and everyone walks away. Dr. Morrison gets his daughter back. Mrs. Chen keeps her house. Mr. Martinez gets to continue his quiet little life. Everyone wins. And if we refuse? Emma asked. Then things become unpleasant for everyone involved? Jake suddenly looked up at Emma, his eyes wide with fear. Mom, Shadow is telling me something really important. Not now, baby. No, Mom, this is about Dr. Morrison's daughter. Shadow says she's not at their main place. She's somewhere else. The voice on the phone paused. What did the boy just say? Emma's heart raced. She tried to signal Jake to be quiet, but he was too focused on whatever Shadow was telling him. Shadow says the little girl is in a place with lots of water, like a boat or something, and she's not hurt, but she's really scared. There was a long silence on the phone. Then the voice returned, but it was different now. Interested, excited. Fascinating? The dog really can communicate with him, can it? David shot Emma a warning look, but it was too late. Shadow says there are 3 bad men with the little girl, and one of them has a tattoo of a snake on his hand. Emma heard a sharp intake of breath from the phone. Remarkable. Simply remarkable. What are you talking about? Emma demanded. Your son, Mrs. Chen, has just described details that only 5 people in the world should know. The location of Dr. Morrison's daughter, the number of men guarding her, even the identifying marks of my associate. Details that the dog couldn't possibly know unless he'd been there. Emma felt sick. What does that mean? It means the dog's abilities are far more advanced than we realized. And it means your son's gift is genuine. Jake tugged on Emma's sleeve. Mom, Shadow says we're in really big trouble now. The boy is correct, the voice said. You see, I was prepared to simply eliminate you all as a nuisance. But now you've become valuable. We're not valuable to anyone, Sarah said desperately. We're just normal people who stumbled into something we don't understand. Normal people don't communicate with animals telepathically. Normal people don't access memories that exist only in a dog's mind. Your son has demonstrated an ability that governments would pay millions to possess. Emma pulled Jake closer to her. You can't have him. I don't want to take him, Mrs. Chen. I want to employ him. Think of the possibilities. A child who can access the memories of any animal. Do you know what that could mean for intelligence gathering, for military operations, for law enforcement? You're talking about using a 5-year-old as some kind of weapon. I'm talking about giving a gifted child the chance to serve his country, to use his abilities for the greater good. David had heard enough. The answer is no, to all of it. I was afraid you'd say that. Dr. Morrison, would you please explain to our friends what happens when people refuse my generous offers? Dr. Morrison's voice came back on the line, trembling with fear. David, please, just do what he says. These people, they don't make empty threats. Where's your daughter, Doctor? Morrison? I don't know. They moved her after I told them about Shadow. They said it was for security reasons. Jake suddenly sat up straight. Shadow knows where she is now. He can see her through the other dog's eyes. Emma's heart stopped. What other dog? There's another dog like Shadow, one who was trained the same way, and that dog is with the little girl right now. The voice on the phone was silent for a long moment. Then, impossible. There's only one dog with those abilities. Shadow says there are 3 dogs like him. He's one, the dog with the little girl is another, and there's a third one somewhere else. They can all talk to each other in their minds. Emma felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Nothing made sense anymore. What is this man talking about? She demanded. David's face was grim. It's a military program. They've been trying to develop psychic communication with animals for decades. I thought it was just a rumor. It's not a rumor, the voice said. It's a highly classified research project that has produced exactly 3 successful subjects. Shadow was supposed to be terminated when the program was shut down last year. Why was it shut down? Because the dogs became too intelligent, too independent. They started refusing orders, protecting targets instead of tracking them. They became liabilities. Jake looked up at Emma with tears in his eyes. Shadow says the other dogs are scared. They don't want to hurt people anymore, but the bad men make them do it. Make them how? Emma asked. They hurt the dogs if they don't obey, and they threaten to hurt the people the dogs care about. Emma felt a surge of rage. You're torturing innocent animals? I'm managing valuable assets, but this conversation has gone on long enough. You have 1 hour to decide, Mrs. Chen. Bring me the boy and the dog, or everyone you care about starts dying. The line went dead. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the threat settling over them like a dark cloud. Finally, Sarah spoke. We have to go to the FBI, the real FBI, not local cops. And tell them what? David asked. That a 5-year-old can read dogs' minds? That there's a secret military program using psychic animals? They'll think we're insane. We have the photographs. Photographs of animal abuse. That's not enough to bring down a military black ops program. Emma looked at Jake, who was holding Shadow close and whispering to him. What are you two talking about? Shadow is telling me about the other dogs. Their names are Hunter and Tracker. Hunter is with the little girl, and Tracker is somewhere far away, in a place with lots of snow. What else is Shadow telling you? He says there's a way to stop the bad men, but it's dangerous, and we'd have to trust the other dogs to help us. David leaned forward. What kind of way? Jake listened for a moment, then looked up with serious eyes. Shadow says the bad men have a weakness. They're so used to controlling everything that they don't know what to do when things don't go according to plan. What does that mean? It means we have to do something they're not expecting. Emma felt a chill. Like what? Like Rescue Doctor, Morrison's daughter, ourselves. The adult stared at Jake in shock. Baby, that's impossible. We don't even know where she is. Shadow knows. Hunter is telling him right now. She's on a boat at the marina about 20 minutes from here. Sarah shook her head. Even if that's true, how could we possibly rescue her? These people have guns. They're professionals. Shadow says Hunter wants to help us. He's tired of being afraid, and he wants to protect the little girl instead of guarding her. David was quiet for a long moment, thinking. It could work, he said finally. Are you insane? Emma demanded. Think about it. They're expecting us to either surrender or run. They're not expecting us to go on the offensive. We're not soldiers, David. We're just ordinary people. No, we're not. We have something they don't expect. We have a way to communicate with their own assets. Jake nodded eagerly. Shadow says if we can get close enough to the boat, Hunter will help us. He can make the bad men think there's trouble somewhere else, so they'll leave the little girl alone. Emma looked at the puppy in her arms, still barely breathing. Then at her son, who was somehow connected to dogs that could think and plan and communicate across distances. The whole situation felt like something out of a science fiction movie. This is crazy, she said. Mom, we have to try. Dr. Morrison was nice to us, and his daughter is just a little kid like me. Shadow says she's really scared, and she keeps asking for her daddy. Emma felt tears building in her eyes. She thought about her own father, who had died when she was 8. She remembered the terror of feeling alone in the world, of not knowing if anyone would come to save her. How would we even get to the marina without being caught? David was already thinking ahead. They'll be watching the main roads, but there are back ways, service roads that most people don't know about. And then what? We just walk onto a boat full of armed men? We don't have to. Hunter can create a distraction, draw them away from the girl, then we get her and leave. Sarah spoke up. What about after that? Even if we rescue her, they'll still be after us. Jake listened to Shadow for a moment, then smiled for the first time all evening. Shadow says we won't be alone. There are good people who want to help us, but they've been afraid to act because they didn't have proof. What kind of good people? FBI agents who have been investigating the bad men for a long time, and animal rights people who suspected something was wrong but couldn't prove it, and even some of the mayor's own people who don't like what's happening. Emma felt a spark of hope. How does Shadow know all this? Because dogs see and hear everything, Mom. They know who the good people are and who the bad people are. And Shadow has been in a lot of places with a lot of different people. David nodded slowly. That makes sense. Dogs are incredible observers. They pick up on things humans miss. So, what are you saying? That we have allies we don't even know about? I'm saying that if we rescue Dr. Morrison's daughter, If we can prove that these people are kidnapping children and torturing animals, then good people will have the courage to act. Emma looked at each of them in turn. Sarah, determined despite her fear. David, grim but resolute. Jake, innocent but somehow wise beyond his years. And Shadow, watching her with eyes that seemed to hold more intelligence than any animal should possess. "If we do this," she said slowly, "there's no going back. Our old lives are over." "Our old lives were over the moment we found Shadow," David said quietly. Emma thought about her job, her house, her quiet routine. Then she thought about the dogs in the cages, suffering in the darkness. She thought about Doctor, Morrison's daughter, terrified and alone on a boat somewhere. She thought about Jake, who had somehow been given a gift that could make a difference in the world. "Okay," she said, "let's go save that little girl." As they drove toward the marina, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message, but this time, it wasn't from the unknown number that had been threatening them. It was from Dr. Morrison. "Emma, I'm sorry for what I did. They made me choose between your safety and my daughter's life, but I want you to know that you're not alone. There are others who want to help. Look for a man named Agent Carter at the marina. He's been undercover for months, waiting for a chance to act. Tell him the code word Phoenix, and he'll know you're legitimate. Please save my little girl. Her name is Lily, and she's all I have left." Emma showed the message to the others. "Agent Carter?" David said. "I've heard that name before. He used to work with some of the same people I did, before everything went sideways. Can we trust him?" "I think so, but we'll know soon enough." As they approached the marina, Emma could see boats bobbing in the dark water, their masts swaying gently in the night breeze. Somewhere out there, a little girl was waiting for someone to rescue her, and they were going to be the ones to do it. Jake squeezed Shadow closer to him. "Shadow says Hunter is ready to help us, and he says to tell you that everything's going to be okay." Emma hoped the dog was right, because if he wasn't, they were all about to walk into a trap that would destroy them all. The marina was quieter than a graveyard at midnight. Only the gentle lapping of water against boat hulls and the distant hum of the highway broke the silence. David parked the van behind a seafood restaurant that had closed hours ago, its neon sign flickering weakly in the darkness. "There," Jake whispered, pointing toward a large white yacht moored at the far end of the marina. "Shadow says that's where the little girl is." Emma squinted through the darkness. The yacht was impressive, easily 60 feet long, with multiple levels and dark windows. A few lights glowed from inside, but she couldn't see any movement. "How many people are on board?" David asked. Jake closed his eyes, listening to something only he could hear. "Hunter says there are 3 bad men, plus the little girl, but one of the men just left to check on something." "That leaves 2. Hunter is trying to make them think there's trouble with the engine. He's been making noise in the engine room, and now they're both down there trying to figure out what's wrong." Sarah pulled out her camera. "Should I keep taking pictures?" "Yes, document everything. We'll need proof of what happened here." As they watched the yacht, Emma noticed a man walking along the dock. He was dressed casually, like someone out for an evening stroll, but something about the way he moved suggested he was anything but casual. "That might be Agent Carter," David said. Emma made a decision. "I'm going to talk to him." "Emma, wait." But she was already climbing out of the van, the puppy still cradled in her arms. She walked toward the marina entrance, trying to look like a worried pet owner seeking help for a sick animal. The man noticed her approach and stopped walking. As she got closer, she could see he was in his 40s, with graying hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. "Excuse me," Emma said softly. "I'm looking for Agent Carter." The man's hand moved slightly, and Emma realized he was reaching for a weapon. But then she remembered the code word. "Phoenix," she said quickly. The man's posture relaxed slightly. "You're Emma Chen." "How did you know?" "Dr. Morrison described you, along with a 5-year-old boy who can apparently communicate with dogs." Emma felt a surge of relief. This man knew what was happening. "Is Lily on that yacht?" "Yes, and she's in more danger than her father realizes. They're not just holding her for leverage. They're planning to use her to force your son to cooperate." "What do you mean?" "They're going to hurt her if Jake doesn't demonstrate his abilities. They want to study how the connection works, see if they can replicate it." Emma's blood turned to ice. "Over my dead body." "That might be the outcome if we're not careful. How many people do you have with you?" 3 adults, my son, and 2 dogs. 2 dogs? We rescued a puppy from the facility, and Shadow is special. Agent Carter nodded grimly. I've heard about Shadow. He's the reason I've been working this case for 8 months. What do you mean? 8 months ago, Shadow escaped from a military transport. He made his way to a small town in Oregon and somehow led a local sheriff to a mass grave containing the bodies of 12 missing persons. All of them had been victims of human trafficking. Emma felt dizzy. Shadow found them? Not just found them. He led investigators to evidence that brought down an entire trafficking network. But the people behind it were connected to the same group you're dealing with now. So Shadow has been fighting these people for months. In his own way, yes. Dogs like Shadow don't just have enhanced intelligence. They have something like a moral compass. They understand right and wrong in ways that most humans can't comprehend. Emma looked back toward the van, where she could see Jake's silhouette in the window. What do? We get the girl out, and we make sure your son never falls into their hands. How? I've got backup on the way, but they won't be here for another hour. We need to move now before they realize I'm not just a random civilian. Emma nodded. Jake says the dog on the boat is going to help us. Agent Carter's eyebrows rose. Hunter? You know about Hunter? I've been tracking him too. He was reported as killed in action 6 months ago, but I suspected he'd been repurposed for this operation. They walked back toward the van together. When they reached it, Agent Carter introduced himself to the others. I'm going to be straight with you, he said. This is not going to be easy. These people are professionals, and they're desperate. If they realize we're here, they'll kill the girl rather than let her be rescued. So, what's the plan? David asked. Jake, can you ask Hunter to create a bigger distraction? Something that will get both guards away from Lily? Jake nodded and closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them again. Hunter says he can make it sound like the boat is sinking, but he needs Shadow to help him. How can Shadow help from here? They can share thoughts. If Shadow concentrates really hard, he can make Hunter stronger. Agent Carter looked skeptical. That sounds like science fiction. A lot of what we've seen tonight sounds like science fiction, Emma said. But it's real. Jake suddenly grabbed Emma's arm. Something's wrong. Hunter says the bad men are coming back upstairs, and they're angry. Through the marina, they could hear shouting coming from the direction of the yacht. They know something's up, Agent Carter said. We need to move now. What about the puppy? Emma asked, looking down at Hope, who was still barely breathing in her arms. Bring him. We can't leave him here. They made their way quickly through the marina, staying in the shadows between the boats. As they got closer to the yacht, Emma could hear voices carrying across the water. I'm telling you, something's wrong with this boat. Nothing's wrong with the boat, you idiot. Someone's messing with us. Then where's Rodriguez? He should have been back an hour ago. Jake tugged on Emma's sleeve. Hunter says one of the bad men is going to check on the little girl. We have to hurry. Agent Carter pulled out his weapon. Sarah, stay here with the boy and the dogs. Emma, David, you're with me. I'm not leaving my son. Emma, if something goes wrong, Jake needs to be as far away from here as possible. Mom, it's okay, Jake said quietly. Shadow will protect me, and Hunter needs you to help save Lily. Emma knelt beside her son. I'll be right back, I promise. I know, Mom. Shadow says the good guys are going to win tonight. Emma kissed his forehead, then followed Agent Carter and David toward the yacht. They moved silently along the dock, using other boats as cover. As they approached the yacht, Emma could see movement through the windows. 2 men were arguing in what looked like the main cabin. She couldn't see Lily anywhere. She's probably below deck, Agent Carter whispered. In one of the bedrooms. They reached the yacht, and Agent Carter carefully stepped aboard. The boat rocked slightly under his weight, but the men inside didn't seem to notice. Hunter says they're coming. Jake's voice carried softly across the water. He's going to do something big now. Suddenly, alarms began blaring from inside the yacht. Red lights flashed, and Emma could hear the sound of rushing water. What the hell? The bilge pump! Something's wrong with the bilge pump. The 2 men ran toward the back of the boat, shouting at each other. Agent Carter motioned for Emma and David to follow him inside. The interior of the yacht was luxurious but sterile, like a fancy hotel room with no personality. They moved quickly through the main cabin toward a narrow staircase leading below deck. Lily, Emma called softly. Lily, are you here? a small voice answered from somewhere below. "Who's there? Are you here to hurt me?" "No, sweetheart. We're here to take you home to your daddy." They found Lily in a small bedroom at the front of the boat. She was maybe 7 years old, with dark hair and frightened eyes that looked too old for her face. She was sitting on the bed, hugging a small stuffed animal. But she wasn't alone. A large German shepherd sat beside her, his intelligent eyes watching the doorway. This had to be Hunter. "It's okay, boy," Emma said softly. "We're friends." Hunter looked at her for a moment, then seemed to nod. He gently nuzzled Lily's hand, as if telling her it was safe to go with these people. "Are you really going to take me to my daddy?" Lily asked. "Yes, sweetheart, but we have to be very quiet, okay?" Lily nodded and slipped off the bed. Hunter followed her, staying close to her side. They made their way back through the yacht, but as they reached the main cabin, Emma heard footsteps on the deck above. "They're back," Agent Carter whispered. "Where's the girl?" a voice shouted from outside. "She was in the cabin 5 minutes ago." "Find her, now!" Agent Carter motioned for them to stay low. Through the windows, Emma could see flashlight beams sweeping the deck. "The dock!" Agent Carter whispered. "We have to get to the dock." But as they moved toward the exit, a man appeared in the doorway. He was holding a gun, and his face was twisted with rage. "Nobody move!" Agent Carter stepped forward, his own weapon raised. "Federal agent, put your weapon down." "Federal agent, my ass, you're that undercover cop we've been looking for." Emma's heart stopped. If Agent Carter's cover was blown, they were all in serious trouble. "Lily, come here right now," the man demanded. But Lily didn't move. Instead, Hunter stepped forward, positioning himself between the man and the little girl. The dog's lips pulled back in a silent snarl. "Control your dog, or I'll shoot it." "He's not my dog," Agent Carter said, "and I don't think he's going to let you hurt that little girl." The man raised his gun toward Hunter, but before he could fire, something remarkable happened. Hunter began to growl, but it wasn't a normal dog growl. It was deeper, more resonant, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Through the walls of the yacht, Emma could hear other dogs responding, barking, howling, creating a chorus of sound that echoed across the marina. "What the hell?" The man spun around, confused by the sound. In that moment of distraction, Agent Carter moved. He tackled the gunman, and they both went down hard. "Run!" Agent Carter shouted. Emma grabbed Lily's hand and they ran for the deck. David was right behind them, with Hunter bringing up the rear. They reached the dock just as the second gunman appeared from below deck. But instead of chasing them, he was staring at Hunter with something like terror in his eyes. "That's not possible," he whispered. "You're supposed to be dead." Hunter looked at the man for a long moment, then turned and trotted after Emma and Lily. It was as if he was dismissing the man as unworthy of his attention. They ran along the dock toward the van, Lily's small legs working hard to keep up. Behind them, Emma could hear more shouting and the sound of sirens in the distance. "Agent Carter called for backup," David said, breathing hard. They reached the van just as Jake threw open the door. "Mom, did you get her?" "We got her, baby." Lily climbed into the van and immediately saw Shadow. Her eyes widened with wonder. "There are 2 of them," she whispered. "Lily, this is my son Jake, and this is Shadow, and you've already met Hunter." Hunter jumped into the van behind them and immediately went to Shadow. The 2 dogs touched noses, and Emma could swear she saw some kind of recognition pass between them. "They're talking?" Jake said with amazement. "They're really talking to each other." "What are they saying?" Lily asked. Jake listened for a moment. "They're saying that the bad men can't hurt anyone anymore, and that we're all going to be safe now." As if summoned by his words, FBI vehicles began pouring into the marina. Emma counted at least 6 cars, their blue and red lights painting the night in patriotic colors. Agent Carter appeared at the van window, looking disheveled but triumphant. "It's over," he said. "We got them both, and we found enough evidence on that yacht to bring down the entire operation." "What about the other facilities?" Emma asked. "The dogs we saw in the basement?" "Teams are raiding them right now. Every location Shadow and Hunter have been to, every place they remember. By morning, we'll have shut down the entire network." Dr. Morrison's car screeched into the marina parking lot. He jumped out and ran toward the van, tears streaming down his face. "Lily! Oh God, Lily!" Father and daughter were reunited in a hug that made Emma's heart ache with joy. As she watched them, She felt the puppy stir in her arms. Hope's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time since she'd rescued him, he seemed truly aware of his surroundings. "He's going to be okay," Jake said, gently stroking the puppy's fur. "Shadow says Hope is going to be okay." Emma looked around at the scene of organized chaos. FBI agents were everywhere, documenting evidence, arresting suspects, coordinating with other teams. But in the middle of it all, her son sat peacefully with two extraordinary dogs, somehow connected to them in a way that defied explanation. "What happens now?" she asked Agent Carter. "Now you go home, all of you. The FBI will need statements, but that can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, you've done something remarkable. What about Jake's ability? Will people want to study him?" Agent Carter's expression grew serious. "There will be people who are interested, yes. But Jake's welfare comes first, always. And besides, something tells me that Shadow and Hunter won't let anyone hurt him." As if in response to his words, both dogs moved closer to Jake, flanking him protectively. "What about all the dogs we couldn't save tonight?" Sarah asked. "They're being rescued as we speak. Every dog in every facility is being moved to legitimate shelters and veterinary hospitals. They'll get the care they need." Emma felt tears of relief streaming down her face. It was over. Really over. As they prepared to leave the marina, Jake tugged on her sleeve one more time. "Mom, Shadow wants to tell you something." "What is it, baby?" Jake listened for a moment, then smiled. "He says thank you. For not leaving him in the dark. For believing in him when nobody else would." Emma knelt beside Shadow and looked into his intelligent brown eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing us together, for making us brave." Shadow's tail wagged once, and then he settled down beside Jake for the ride home. As they drove through the quiet streets, Emma reflected on how much their lives had changed in just one day. This morning, she'd been a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Tonight, she was part of something larger, something important. And Jake would never be the same either. He'd discovered a gift that connected him to creatures most people couldn't understand. But more than that, he'd learned that sometimes being brave meant doing the right thing, even when it was scary. The puppy Hope slept peacefully in Emma's arms, his breathing steady and strong. Shadow and Hunter dozed in the back seat, their job finally done. And Jake leaned against the window, watching the world go by, with eyes that seemed older and wiser than his 5 years. "Mom," he said quietly as they pulled into their driveway. "Yes, baby. Shadow says there are other animals out there who need help. Not just dogs, but all kinds of animals. And he says maybe, if we want to, we could help them too." Emma looked at her son, then at the dogs who had changed their lives, then at the puppy who represented hope for the future. "Maybe we could," she said. "Maybe we could." As they walked into their house, Emma realized that their old life was indeed over. But their new life, the one where they stood up for those who couldn't speak for themselves, was just beginning. And somewhere in the distance, other animals were waiting for someone to hear their voices, to understand their thoughts, to fight for their freedom. Jake smiled as he settled Shadow and Hunter in the living room. "Don't worry," he whispered to them. "We'll help them all." Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. A new day was beginning, and with it, endless possibilities for a little boy who could hear the thoughts of animals, and a mother who had learned that sometimes the most extraordinary adventures begin with the simplest act of compassion. The world would never be the same, and neither would they. But that was perfectly okay, because some changes, Emma realized, are worth everything. If you enjoyed this incredible story of courage, connection, and hope, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more amazing tales. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world.